Hi, I'm here today with Christina. How are you doing, Christina?
I'm doing good.
Good.
So,
Thanks for joining me today and being willing to share your experiences and talk about imposter syndrome. Do you want
yes.
to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Christina Gorton. I am a front end developer, currently a web instructor as well. I right now work at Design Plus Code teaching courses, but will be working at Lambda soon.
Yeah.
Excited about that. So that is who I am currently. I'm also a
Awesome.
mom to four kids. So, in whatever free time I have, I'm usually with them and my husband.
Awesome. How did you get into programming, into the tech world?
So I started, I guess, a little bit later or non-traditional. I was a stay-at-home mom for about 5 years before I
Uh,
even started considering tech. It was actually my father-in-law that kind of pushed me to get into it. We had always kind of looked for ways to be able to work remotely and still be able to kind of travel. And so I just started learning on my own and self-taught, I guess, if
yeah.
you want to call it self-taught, and got a remote job after a little while, and so been doing that ever since.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we have so many students that are they're not the college age trying to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. They're in careers, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of stay-at-home moms that are trying to find something that they want to get into. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think you a lot of our students will relate to you, to your story. So that's great.
yeah.
When you decided to start learning,
Mm-hmm.
what fears did you face as you started that process?
I think a lot of times when you see programmers, the typical, like what you think of a programmer, I'm like, am I too old to do this now? I'm not even old, but initially I was just like, okay, I'm kind of getting into it late in the game. I also I don't have a CS degree. I barely even knew how to, create a file on the computer when I first got into coding. So,
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of fears initially of just, is this just too much, and can I even do this? Just a lot of doubts on whether I could even program or not. So there was a lot of fears initially, I think.
yeah. And I started when I was 28, so
Yeah, me too.
not awesome. So not too like not too much older, but not young college age, like trying to make that decision, trying to get into a career. So I
Yeah.
changed careers from photography to programming,
Yes.
and a lot of our students are doing the same thing. Uh,
Yeah.
when you felt that unsurety, those fears, or if I think it's fair to label that imposter syndrome. When you started to
Hmm.
feel that imposter syndrome, um, what were there any times that it stopped you from learning, or made it unnecessarily harder on yourself? How did that experience go?
Yeah, I think so. I think especially initially first coming into it, it was so overwhelming, not knowing everything, and it's so easy to give up on something when it's hard. You don't
Yeah,
want to push through. I had a lot going on in my life. I had babies, I had kids, I was taking care of other things, and it was easy to just kind of put it off to the side and ignore it every time it got difficult.
yeah,
Um, so for me, just like finding a community was a big thing. Finding like a community to kind of learn with, people going through the same struggles, was able to push through and create little wins over time and just keep going with it. So yeah, I definitely put it off a lot in the beginning. I think.
yeah, yeah. Luckily, with Lambda School, you can't put it off.
Yeah.
It, it's full steam ahead. Unfortunately, that I think students often feel like they're drowning in it,
Yeah.
and that makes it even tougher. We'll come back to that thought. I wanted to break down a couple of things you said. So,
Mhm.
a common theme that I've seen as I've been working on resources for our students on imposter syndrome. A common theme I've seen is that community really helps a lot of people.
Yeah.
Did you have any experiences where you were feeling especially down and someone in your support group community was able to help you and talk you through those moments?
Yeah, definitely. For me, because I was more of self-taught, I found a lot of tech communities online, definitely through Twitter and things like that. So there's like a Code Newbies community, and I like CSS art. So I got into a community that was doing that. And every time I kind of was getting to the point where I just didn't feel like I could do it anymore, I would also share my code along the way, which is a scary thing. I think that plays into imposter syndrome, is like sharing your code as you're learning. But I was pretty adamant about sharing my code from the beginning. And so I had a lot of people who were very kind and just kind of talking me through it, like, hey, this is, great. Look what you did last week compared to this week. And I think that can be kind of at Lambda, you can see that too, from week one to, later on, you can see that growth. I think that's kind of a nice thing about the boot camps, is that you do start so early on, like not knowing anything, and you can see that progress going on happening. And I was able to do that with these communities as well. So I got a lot of encouragement as I was going, and I was building things and being able to show them, and they could just be like, look, look what you're doing now compared to what you were doing then, keep going.
Yeah.
So that was a great thing about having a community. So.
Cool. And I like what you said too about the little wins.
Mm-hmm.
And even just barely what you shared about looking back even just a week ago and seeing the progress you've made. I think imposter syndrome sometimes takes the form in our minds of not letting us recognize that growth in ourselves, but that is so important to take those little wins, to recognize how far you've come. What have you found helps you to recognize those little wins and be able to point that out to yourself, even when your imposter syndrome is trying to take that away?
Yeah, so for me, building things, so I built a lot of stuff, and I could go back and look even just at my code or what I was able to build from one week to another. So building little projects, having little side projects, maybe not huge things, but small things that I could do in like a day or two, and then go back and try again maybe the next week and add on to it. Definitely showed me that I could keep going, and I was learning, and I was not stagnant in my learning. And then I think also, as far as like small wins, I kept track of things, whether it was with blogging. So I usually blogged what I was learning, or maybe I did something and I put it out, like being able to talk at a conference. So I did an online conference, and just kind of having a file of like my little bit of wins was a big encouragement to keep going. I mean, for myself, I also kept track of rejections, just because I think I can learn from them. And I try to see those as like a learning experience instead of, getting really down on it. And I think having that mind frame from the beginning of like, yeah, I'm going to have these rejections. I'm going to be rejected for probably lots of things, and that's okay. Yeah. What can I learn from that? Also made those into wins later on when I could see my growth from it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, there's probably no bigger way to bring imposter syndrome into your mind, into your life, than being rejected from something, right? Yeah. At that point, it's like someone else is now telling you seemingly that you're not good enough.
Yeah.
So I love that idea of changing the mindset around those rejections and using them as a platform to learn from and to learn and grow from.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing any particular experience with that?
Yeah. So even with Lambda, I applied a little while ago, and, at the time it was a rejection, and I look at rejections as a not now, not a never. And so I asked for feedback, and Lambda was one of the companies that gave me feedback that I could actually, grow from. So I took that feedback, and I kept, learning and applying the feedback, and then I applied again. And I was able to get the job because I was able to take that rejection and get that feedback and then grow from it instead of just letting it, overwhelm me, which I think is easy. I think it's okay to grieve the rejections at first, be upset, be sad about it. It does suck, to be rejected, but then, you move on from it and you grow from it. And if you can grow from it, then you can a lot of times go back and try again. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So applicable, right here with getting hired at Lambda. That's awesome.
Yep.
Well, I'm really happy that you came back, because we're really excited to have you on the team. I went through not a similar experience. I didn't have the happy ending, but I went through a pretty tough rejection myself, where there was this company that their values really aligned with what my values, and I felt like that was my dream company.
Yeah.
And we've all got that, like, oh, if I could only work for this company, that would be so amazing. So I applied. I got my first couple interviews. It was in a language I didn't know, so I started learning and practicing. I built a whole app on that language to show them, and they were like, oh, this is impressive. I can't believe you spent the weekend to learn this and build this. And I was feeling all good, and I went through their interview process. Took a long time. It was like 2 months, 4 interviews. Got to the end, and they're like, you're not what we're looking for.
Yep.
Like, you just wasted 2 months of my life.
I went through that too.
Yeah. I was like emotionally invested. Pretty sure I was getting the job because I'd been through 4 interviews, and then it just like, I got that. And it was just like a simple, straightforward, like, sorry, we're done.
Yep.
And that was one of my toughest rejections. But I'm like you, I like to look at those and learn and grow from those experiences, and actually ended up finding a really, really cool job because of going through that experience.
Yeah.
That I don't think I would have been ready for without that. So I think that's great advice to share. Do you, as a mother, as a woman, did you have any extra fears coming into the tech industry?
I did. You hear a lot of things, especially as a woman in tech, you hear a lot of not so great stories. So I definitely had a lot of fears. I mean, I did actually, I had my newest daughter a few months ago, and at the time I was talking to the company I was contract with, and they told me, I could go on maternity leave. It wasn't going to be a problem. And when I did, then I got hey, we don't need you anymore when I was ready to come back. And so it was kind of like, you have these circumstances and you have to just keep going through them. And there are a lot of rejections, a lot of hard things in the tech industry. I don't think everything's easy. It's not like you're going to get a job, and once you get a job, it's easy to get a job. You have to go through all the hiring process is not fun. So you have to go through all of that, each time. And I think you have to just kind of get in this mindset of, you just need that one company that's going to be good and be a good fit for you, and you're going to be a good fit for them. And it takes time sometimes. And there is a lot of, going through that right after I had a kid, I went through probably at least 10 to 15 companies. And, I got a lot of rejections when I was going through the whole process of trying to find another job. And so it can definitely wear you down and bring your self-confidence down a whole lot. So just kind of making sure you do have that community around you and that you have a good support when you're going through all that kind of stuff. I think it helps a lot to keep you grounded.
Yeah. It's so easy to just spiral down and tell yourself that you're not good enough and you're not ever going to make it. But everybody I've seen persevere through that time, finding what they're looking for, finding a good job. My brother-in-law went through a boot camp a few years ago, and it took him almost 2 years to find that first job.
Yep.
And that's going to happen. He finally got that first job because that whole time he kept practicing, he kept programming, he kept applying, rejection after rejection, and finally got there. And he's been there ever since. Loves the company. He tells me now that 2 years of struggling was totally worth it because of where he's at now, which I think
definitely cool. And I think even those like interviews that are rejections, if you look at them as like good practice, because the whole interviewing process is tough in general and you never know exactly what to expect. So the more people you interview with, the better sense you have of like what to expect when you interview, so that when you get to that company that you really want to impress, you're going to be able to impress them more because you've gone through all these interviews, you've done this before. So it's
Yeah.
okay to have those, rejections, even if you you thought that company was that company for you. I've been through that too. I went through a company, they've reached out to me 3 different times, reached out to me, and then we still didn't ever go through after several interviews. So it's just a weird thing with these companies that you're just sometimes it doesn't work out. It doesn't mean it's no, it just means not right now, or maybe not with this company, but you can keep progressing and go to another company and keep trying. And I think you'll definitely get to that company that's a good fit for you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. What about those who are learning and are feeling, that they may be feeling that imposter syndrome? They don't want to reach out to people. What advice would you give to someone who's kind of feeling down in the learning process right now?
I think my biggest advice would probably be that you're going to have to get over that. As hard as that is, I've been through depression and anxiety. I had postpartum depression, anxiety. It's hard to reach out to people when you're going through these kinds of things, but if you want to succeed and you really want this, you're going to have to reach out to people, because even when you get onto a team and you do get a job, you have to work with other people. And so being able to communicate and share what's going on and being able to talk through these things, that's what's going to help you succeed and help you to continue learning. So if you're stuck, you have to learn how to ask good questions and communicate early on. Otherwise, you're just going to keep being stuck. As someone who's worked remotely for all my jobs, that was something I had to learn right away, that you can't not speak up, because if you don't speak up, you're going to just fall behind and you're not going to get anything done. So the same thing with learning. If you're stuck, you need to ask questions. My husband's learning to code right now too, and I tell him that all the time, because he's just sometimes he'll just want to power through and he'll be stuck for days. And I'm like, wow, this is great. And I know once you get through that, you're going to learn a whole bunch. If you would ask someone a question beforehand, you could probably get there quicker. And so ask someone.
I think there's value in struggling up to a point.
Yeah.
But once you get to that point that you're spinning your tires, then you need to reach out. But I think there's value in, Googling, trying to get unstuck by yourself up to a point. So there's definitely a balance there.
Yeah. I remember early on, because when my first developer job, I was, very junior, but it was a remote position. And I asked, because I felt horrible, asking questions all the time. I had to ask questions all the time. And, in the end, when I asked a bunch of senior developers, do you think junior developers should ask questions? Do you think people learning should ask questions, or should I just struggle through? All of them were like, you struggle through for 20 to 30 minutes, and then you ask a specific question so that you can get to the next point and you can keep going. Otherwise, it's bad for everyone, not just you, especially when you're on a team or whatever. You're just wasting everyone's time if you don't actually try to reach out and ask questions. So I think asking questions is definitely important, and being able to communicate even when you're scared and you feel like you're asking dumb questions or whatever.
Well, and from my experience, and tell me what your experience has been like, but even when I feel like it's a dumb question, I've never had anyone say that's a dumb question, or say, go look it up on your own. Everybody's been so willing to help. And I've even seen a lot of times where people that have been a lot more senior than me, I'll ask them a question and they'll say, oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Let's go look it up. And it's validating, oh, he didn't know that either, or she didn't know that either. And then realize where that, I'm not the only one with those questions. Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, I definitely have. The teams I've been on have been really great about answering questions. And I think, like you said, sometimes when we do things over and over again, we are doing them without thinking about why we're doing them, or maybe we don't even remember why we're doing them. So when you ask someone who's a little bit more senior, they're kind of like, oh yeah, why are we doing that? And then you can kind of talk through it and like figure out like, okay, it's not me. I'm not just crazy like that. I don't understand this. Like maybe it is something that they've all just done and maybe haven't thought of. So you can ask the question and you can, learn together. And people have been great, to jump onto a call and pair with me or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we figure it out. I think the most important thing is just so you're not wasting your time and you're not wasting their time. It's just, be specific with your questions, not like I don't know this, but, hey, this is what I've gone through. This is what I've tried to figure out. And, can you help me with this? And as long as you're specific, I've never had a problem with anyone just being like, yeah, let's figure this out together kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And even those times where I ask a question and they do know the answer right away, mm-hmm. It's always been a very good conversation of, oh yeah, let me show you how this is. And then, I move on, I learn, and, and it's never been like, oh yeah, you should know how to do this. Let me show you. Yeah. Like it's never been that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I haven't had that yet either. And I've worked on a couple teams now, and I've never had that problem either. They've all always kind of been like, yeah, okay, let's show you. Because if they show you, it helps them out too. They show you that first time, then you know how to do it. And then everyone can keep going on with their work. So it's never been like a big deal. So, and a lot of times developers just like to share what they know anyway. So, we all like to kind of share what we've learned. So they're like, sure, okay, let me help you with this.